I'm Kalumba. I'm a pastor at Newtonsville United Methodist Church in West Ohio. And my colleague, Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Arnold, and I'm the senior pastor of Birmingham First United Methodist Church in North Alabama.
So we are both member of Interagency Sexual Ethics Task Force. So, my friend, we will be looking at taking care of yourself because you are so important. Without you, well, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. That means it's so important. We're going to talk about caring about yourself, your body, your mind, and your spirit. That means your whole being. Your whole being. Let me start with this example. I was meditating on how we're going to start. And then all of a sudden, guess what? All night I couldn't sleep and just thinking, how am I going to start? And then all of a sudden, here comes something, inspiration, divine inspiration. That was so good. I went to John chapter 15. You know that one, yes. Jesus said what? I am the vine and you are the branches. Now, let us look at this image of a vine and the branches. Look at the tree. When you go outside, carefully look. My personality is all surrounded by trees and tall trees. And all of a sudden, every time there is wind blowing, guess what happened to my yard? Leaves and branches. What kind of branches? Dead ones. Therefore, when you look at this image, this is self-care from Jesus. Self-care. And this chapter 15 happened in the upper room, remember? These are the last teaching of Jesus Christ to his disciples. And self-care. He did not forget about self-care. He said this, I am the vine, you are connected to me. As long as you remain connected to me, that means you are feeding from me. And what happened to the branches? They bear fruit. Apart from me, you will not bear fruit. And once you bear fruit, they are not for you enjoyment, they are for enjoyment of other people. Remember when we have grapes, what happened to the grapes? It's for our enjoyment, not for the vine, but for us. Now, if you look at this image, do you ever ask yourself what happened when you look at the tree and yet there are branches connected to the tree and they are dead? What happened? Something happened. The nutrient is not going from the mama tree to the branches. And now, once they are dead, they become what? Liability. Because if you park your car underneath and they fall on your car, what happened? It's the damage. What happened, my friend, if we are not taking care of ourselves as pastors, if we are not feeding, yes, we can stay in the church, we are pastors, we can preach, and yet remember, if you are connected and dead, that means you become a danger. And what happened is once the wind starts blowing, what happened? They go down. Now we know our calling. It is very, very stressful. And conflict and all these things exist. So it is up to us to make sure that we are alive and well and connected, not dry. And that is up to yourself. This is what we're going to talk in this context.
Say again, my name is Stephanie, and it is really wonderful to be here with y'all. When I think about self-care, some of the images from Scripture that really speak to me, that I think we often underplay, in particular as clergy, but then as lay leaders in our churches too, is we focus so much in Scripture on Jesus' serving, and we forget to pay attention to the times in which Jesus invited us into life, and a full picture of life, and a life with feasting, and a life with joy, and a life with rest, and a life of enjoyment. That's why I love John 10:10, where Jesus says, I came to give you life, and more than that, to give you life abundantly. And I think that that's probably unique to each one of us. What does abundant life look like for each of us? What are those things that make life feel rich, that make life feel not just meaningful, but enjoyable, that give us that balance to our life? And it's really important for us as people within our faith to be modeling that. Because I know you've probably heard before the sentiment that Christians don't have any fun, or, that we're so straight-laced. All of those notions, I personally believe it should be the exact opposite. Jesus' intentionality of beginning his ministry with the wedding feast, of turning these huge vats that were used for ritual purity into the best wine served at the wedding. What can that mean for us? That's the way that Jesus comes into the midst of his home community and says, I'm going to begin my ministry. So it is about serving, but we can only serve as well as we are keeping ourselves. And so it's about that abundant life, which is balanced with these activities that bring us joy and rest and wholeness, along with that outpouring. So I'd like for y'all to just turn to someone beside you and talk a little about these two questions. What does abundant life mean to you as a child of God? What does abundant life mean for you as a spiritual leader? So be thinking about, are there differences between those two? And then for you personally, truly, what is it that feeds your soul? What is it that produces that life that looks more than just, it's a good life, I'm fine, but it is abundant, and it is joyful, and it is a life that invites other people to live into that abundant life with you. So talk to your neighbor for just a moment. I don't know if y'all can hear yourself, but there's a lot of energy in this space about what brings you abundant life. My favorite question that somebody has asked me since I've been here for the last couple of days is I sat down next to, I'm forgetting Sandra's last name, but she's not in here. But we sat down beside each other at lunch one day, and that's the first thing she asked me. Doesn't know me, from another part of the country, and she says, Stephanie, what feeds your soul? And it was refreshing, though, to have somebody ask me that, because all of a sudden, in the midst of being in a hotel for a couple of days where, good Lord, we're sitting, and we're, despite the stretch breaks, right? My rear end is tired of sitting, and she asked me that, and I'm instantly transported, even though I'm not really doing what feeds my soul, but I was able to say, oh my gosh, water. I like to be on the lake. My home is, my house right behind it sits a creek. I'm going to the coast in a few weeks. If I can get outside and near some water and just be quiet and float in the lake or sit by the creek or put my feet in the sand, like that is super nurturing to me. Like my soul gets nourished. I didn't even have to go experience it. Just her asking that question to me helped me be in touch with that kind of groundedness that brings to me. So that's what I heard in this room when we asked that question. I'm looking at your faces. Some of you are smiling more. You're a little more alert because you just simply thought about what is it that really brings you life. And I just want to remind you, particularly in a group of people in which you're pastors or you're in a helping profession or you're here because you are a lay servant leader in your community, you cannot forget that God wants that for you. It is not just about us producing wonderful, excellent ministry, engaging opportunities for people to be impacted by God's love. Yes, But it is also about us experiencing that. You are not any less important than the people you are caring for. And I think it's so important that we hear that in the line of work we do, that God hopes for you to have an abundant life, that is the measure of what God desires for you, that you've got this one life and you live it to the fullest and you enjoy it, you savor it, and you balance it as best you can. And balance to me anymore, at least the longer I live, does not mean this perfect, I'm constantly at equilibrium. It means I'm a mother of 2 teens, and so fall is crazy as all get out. I hate fall. But I now know that, and it's a season, and so there are other seasons that are easier. So in the course of the year, there is balance that gives me abundant life. So don't forget the answers that you just gave to each other. We'll be coming back to them.
And now, what are the obstacles to abundant living? Well, you have a plan. Okay, I'm going to change. You make up your own wonderful plan. Exercise. Now, what are the obstacles? And remember, when you stand in your pulpit, people are looking up to you. When you preach, people are expecting you to live what you preach. When you go to a grocery store, the way you related to the cashier person, people are watching. You never know. It can be a moment of what? Preaching. Sometimes you don't have to say something to preach or to send a message. That means the way you relate to your own family. And people in the church are what? Watching. The way you related to your administrative assistant, to your colleague pastor. People are watching. What are your obstacles in your life? When you see, oh my gosh, these are the signal. What are we going to do? So you have to know yourself. I always said, know yourself. Knowing oneself is to know your weaknesses. That's so important, because are your weaknesses that are going to bring you down. On your weaknesses, that's where you're going to be tempted. If you love chocolate, and then you go by, here is a bowl of chocolate. What do? It's free. What do? You can't help it. Just take one and put in your mouth. And that becomes obstacle to what? To what you have said. No much calories in this. I'm going to what? My intake. So you got to know that. Shall I take the whole piece or just a small piece? So this is up to you, and to know that. And most of all, to keep in mind, when I stand in a pulpit, I need to be healthy. To be able to do what? To deliver. And my people are watching. I visited one church in Dayton. I looked at the people in the church. I was amazed how probably people didn't even look that. I saw the pastor was wearing what? Jeans. Those little skinny jeans. Probably they don't even know it. But I looked at all the pastor assistants wearing the same thing. I said to myself, do you even realize that they are just wearing like their senior pastor? And then I looked at several church members. They start doing the same thing. We see, how do we impact people? One more example. My wife and I, we are a clergy couple. She was appointed at the age of 22 as a pastor of a big church in Lubumbashi, Jerusalem church. And for those who know my wife, she doesn't have all the she has a short hair, trimmed. And then when she started serving in that church, guess what happened to all the young lady? They started wearing the hair like their pastor. And that tells you that, my friend, we have big responsibilities. Believe it or not, you can say, oh gosh, this is me, but this is a calling. You are impacting lives.
I think Kalumba chose the chocolate example because when we got in here, I told him, Kalumba, I ate that entire piece of lemon cake for lunch, and now I don't feel good, and I knew better. Because last night he was telling me about his self-care and his eating habits, and he's very good about that. And I fell into the trap that Rob was talking about. I felt entitled. I deserved that piece of lemon cake because I'm here and I'm about to speak, and so I deserved it, and I ate every bit of it. And I'm confessing now. So, the other part. So when we know what gives us abundant life, we know there are obstacles to that. Some we can control, some we cannot control. But when those obstacles become so big or so often, or we don't put up any kind of restraint or boundaries, then we enter that space in which we are at risk for violating those boundaries. So kind of think back to our first session yesterday when you saw the gate and the barbed wire or the razor wire and then the picket fence, or you saw the circle and it has the non-negotiable and the negotiable and then the kind of the semi-permeable. And so when we begin to get so flexible in that everything's negotiable, even the things that shouldn't be, we find ourselves at risk for compromising some of those boundaries. Now I can think, I'm sure we all have, if you have a day off, you get asked to do a funeral. And that's normally one of those boundaries, if it's a church member, that you've got to be able to negotiate. But if you are consistently asked by parishioners to meet on your day off, I don't know about you, but sometimes, even though I've gotten pretty good about sticking to that boundary, that one's always hard when I've tried like 3 times to set a meeting with somebody, but now all they can do is, well, I could meet for lunch on Friday. I have to really sometimes check myself, remind myself that it's really important that I get that time alone to do whatever it is that I need to do. And so I don't have to tell them it's my day off if that feels too awkward or uncomfortable or whatever. I can simply say, I'm so sorry, I've got another commitment. But I have to do some inner self-talk when I do that and to say, you're your commitment, and it's okay to have that commitment. Because I have become aware that taking that day off is one of those things, if I don't do that regularly enough, I'm at risk for not keeping other boundaries that are really important. So will you pull up that? So in your flash drive that you've been given, you have some worksheets from us, and this is one of them. I'm just going to kind of read through and let you think about how you would rate yourself. This is a professional boundaries at-risk inventory. So have you completed an academic course or workshop on professional ethics and boundaries? Check. Yes, y'all have. So we're feeling good about ourselves right now. Do you inappropriately disclose aspects of your life to persons for whom you are providing pastoral care? Are you maintaining a vital, healthy, and satisfying relationship with your spouse, if married, or significant others outside of your parish? That outside of your parish is hard. At least it is to me. Do you provide pastoral counseling to parishioners with whom you have other close working relationships in the parish? Do you feel sexually attracted to someone associated with your ministry? And I think this is a good question here where it's important to name. Attraction isn't the problem. We are made, you've heard us say this, sexuality is a good thing. And so we don't need to, I think, be people who act like, oh my gosh, once you're married or you found the one, then you never have attraction to someone else. I don't personally think that that's true. But if you're not healthy, then you're not going to know how to respond to those feelings in appropriate ways. So there's nothing wrong with finding another human being attractive, but knowing how you respond to that feeling of attraction is really important. Let's see. Do you fantasize about kissing or touching someone with whom you have a ministry relationship? There you go. We're starting to be in at-risk behavior. Do you comment to someone related to your ministry on how attractive he or she is, or make remarks about his or her body? We saw that in the skit yesterday. Are you tempted to ask a member, former member, or someone you are providing pastoral counseling for a date? If these are things you're noticing coming up, then this is a really appropriate time to share with a trusted confidant, a friend who's a support person, not someone like we saw at the clergy table, where you won't get the support and resources you need, but somebody for whom you have experienced their ability to speak truth to you in a loving, non-judgmental way. Do you commonly take off your jewelry, remove shoes, loosen your tie, or become more informal when providing pastoral care? You just need to pay attention to those things. Those are riskier behaviors. Presently, do you meet a parishioner for coffee or meals, or for socializing outside of a formal pastoral care ministry setting? Has a parishioner in general, or a person you have been providing pastoral care, given you an expensive gift, or frequently gives you inexpensive gifts? Are you stimulated by a current counselee or parishioner's description of sexual behavior or thoughts? Are you in the midst of difficult personal or family crisis yourself? We're not going to read them all. You clearly see this is a pretty in-depth inventory for you to ask yourself and routinely pull that out and look at that and just give yourself some assessment. What are the behaviors that you might engage in that would make it more likely for you to violate boundaries? So these are just questions for us to be asking ourselves when we're considering kind of that continuum, that balance aspect. Not every aspect of our life is always going to be in perfect balance. There will be obstacles at times to our ability to have that full, abundant life that we want and that we hope to invite others into. But when we notice that obstacles are popping up more often than not, we need to start asking ourselves some of these questions so that we can assess for ourselves the risk we are taking. And if we can become aware of the risks we are taking, then often for most of us, that will be enough to make that priority of abundant life more important, to where we shift back that balance.
As we continue, so we're talking about pouring from an empty cup. Well, we all fly, don't we? Some of you took your airplane from whatever, California, Ohio, Nevada, where are you coming from? And each and every airplane is taking off. Before that plane would take off, what do? They give you the instructions. Some of us who have been flying for quite a while, we kind of take that for granted. Oh, I've heard it so many times. And guess what happened? When it happened for the real time, I've seen the movie on YouTube, people putting on the mask on the wrong way. And the message, there is one interesting message. It said, in case there is what? Change of what? Pressure. What happened? All the mask will come down. And then the gracious flight attendant will say, if you see someone in need, put on your mask first before you can assist them. I like my annual conference. because they care about pastors. I got my $100, my check from my conference, for simply doing what? My annual conference says, if you go and have your annual physical, we will send you what? And the reason is why? Because they want us to be healthy. If we are healthy, that means our insurance, we're going to save money in that. And most of all, we will be healthy branches producing juicy fruit. So this is really what my conference is saying. We really want you to be healthy. We care about you. If you are healthy, you're going to work well. And also, we know if someone is thirsty and they want water to drink, and they ask for water, and then you don't have it, can you provide it to someone? No, because simply you don't have it. You need to have that water to be able to help that person in need. That's the reason why, my friend, obstacles, you find them and you work on them and be intentional to say to yourself, I'm going to do it, no matter what. And the conference on the other hand was saying what? If you go and see your doctor, family doctor, and do the right thing, and you will get what? $100. I'm amazed that some of my colleagues did not get their $100. Hey, it's free, but the intent is to have you, to get you healthy. Please do it. Not for your sake of the congregation, also for your sake of what? Your family. It affects your family. It affects also your congregation.
So just want to make sure you hear those two, that last quote and then the second half. So on Kalumba's slide, it said, our calling as children of God is to seek out appropriate places to find our most meaning in sacred space. Our calling as pastors is to help others find their most meaning in sacred space. And what we're trying to say to you is you can't do that second part well if you're not doing the first part well. But to do that is going to require a lot of boundaries, which this is the boundaries track. So I just recently, the church that I serve, I've been pastoring there for over 8 years. But the first 8 years, I was the associate pastor. And then this June, that senior pastor moved to another congregation, and I was asked to be the senior pastor. So I've been doing my new role for about 3 months, though I've been at the congregation now for over 8 years. And I've had already one of those moments that kind of sears in your mind when somebody is inviting you to not practice the healthiest of boundaries, I would say. On one Sunday, I had a parishioner make a very generous offer, a very generous financial offer based upon a need that they had heard. And I was very appreciative. I mean, they tell you, don't you love it when people tell you things 5 minutes before 11 o'clock worship starts? So I'm very quickly before going into the processional hymn, thank you so much. I'd love to talk about that more. They sent an email later on that evening to which this is a very generous financial offer. And so the first thing I did on Monday morning was pick up the phone to call the finance chair and the treasurer to talk with them about what I felt an appropriate response would be. So my plan had been to call them first thing on Tuesday. Well, that Monday night as I checked my email, I see that my former pastor, who thank God is a very good friend of mine, forwarded me an email from this person. And the email said, Keith, Stephanie could use some friendly advice. She needs to respond to all text, phone calls and emails within 24 hours. No one cares how busy she is. I saw that Monday night going to bed and just kind of let it sit and just took a deep breath. Now, that pushes a lot of my buttons. I'm sure it pushes many of yours. It is completely unreasonable to think that I could or should do that, and yet this is a person for whom, it's very complicated. So I decided, after thinking about it, the best I could do would be to, what if anything, could I take responsibility for in that encounter? So 8 o'clock the next day, I picked up the phone, and my church has learned, and I have told them, I'm a firm believer in direct communication. I will not do things via email or on Facebook, and if you're unhappy about something, then, and I hear about it, I'm probably going to pick up the phone and call you and invite you to come have a conversation about it. I find people are a lot less willing to say things to my face than they are to say things about me behind my back. So I picked up the phone and called, and the first thing I said was, so Keith forwarded me your email, because I thought that he needed to know that I had seen exactly what had been said. And I said, so let me begin by saying, I should have told you that I was going to make 2 phone calls before I responded to your offer. So I apologize that I didn't say to you, I'm going to need some time before I can get an answer. I wasn't apologizing for not giving him an answer within the time frame he wanted, because that wasn't reasonable. But I could take responsibility and say, you know what, I could have told you, give me 2 days, give me however much time. To which he very quickly backed up and said, I had a really bad day yesterday, and that email really wasn't about you, and I apologize. Which is great. But all that to say, people will invite us to not practice having healthy boundaries. They will invite us to meet their needs and their demands, whether they're reasonable or not. And so we have to be the ones who remember that we have got to keep ourselves as healthy as possible so that we give from that healthy place. It says, my cup is not your cup on the title. By that we mean everyone is entitled to that living water, but my cup's not your cup. You have your own cup. And in order to help fill that cup for you, to be a conduit of God's love and mercy for you, I have to first receive that for myself and maintain myself in health. And then I can help you to also do that same. But I cannot constantly give to you and never be fed and maintain that healthy boundaries and relationships that we need from pastoral care, but all giving professions.
Well, sometimes we are talking about obstacles. Sometimes we find obstacles in the church itself. How do we address those? Let me give you an example. I served a church when I graduated from Perkins, served a church for 3 years, and then after that, I was appointed to campus ministry. I did campus ministry for 26 years before I was reappointed in local church in Ohio. So I heard the stories about the SPRC and the pastor on how the SPRC can become really an obstacle to your job and to your health. I am a PK. My grandfather was a United Methodist pastor. My father was a United Methodist pastor. I didn't want to be a Methodist pastor, period. The reason being is what? I heard how people in the church treated my father. I saw how my father really wrestled with that in the family and how it impacted us. So I said to myself, nope. But the calling was so hard. I said, Lord, I give up. I became a pastor. Now, when I was appointed, knowing that the SPRC, that will be one of my goals to help me do well my job in that congregation. So was how am I going to do it? And knowing the story about that SPRC. How did I do it? I said I'm going to change the way they do relate to the pastor. In my first meeting, I called the SPRC. I said, we're going to have a moment of what? Talking. And that moment, we have a workshop. I led the workshop. And the first thing I said to my SPRC, you are not my police. They looked at me. I was serious because I wanted to change the way I work with the SPRC. I wanted to have my job, make it easy. I said, you are there to support me. You are there to help me do my job well. And I said, if I fail, it's your fault. Look at me. I said, yes, this is what the SPRC is for. To come alongside me so I will be able to do my job well. If you see that I need improvement, you can always come to me and let me know where do you want me to improve. And make money available so I can do that. And they did. And what happened is I told them what I do. I belong to a covenant. If you don't see me go there, so keep me accountable. I have to have continuing education. I have to take my vacation. I have to have a time with my family. And I'm asking you to help me do that. And also, what I'm asking you to do for me is to pray for me. I want you to work with me. Then the time of evaluation will come. I know it's always there because it's a requirement. But this is how I want you and I to work in this church. Guess what? I was surprised. Every time I have my SPRC meeting, the first question they ask me, Pastor, are you taking care of yourself? Pastor, did you go to your covenant group? Pastor, you need to take your vacation. We have noticed that you have one more week. Well, did you see your wife? We are in two different congregations, and sometimes I have to drive and back and forth. Did you? And they ask all these things, and always they pray for me in the meeting. So, my friend, you make it intentional. What obstacle? How are you going to do it? And that will become your goal. That was one of my goals. I need to change that, and you can do it. You can do it. And I found myself working so well with my SPRC. In the last evaluation, our DS changed the way we do evaluation. Our DS will meet the whole SPRC with a DS. They come and ask all these questions. They change all the forms. And then after they have met with a SPRC, he will meet with a pastor. I came in a room. I'm not bragging about myself. My DS said, I couldn't get your SPRC to shut up about you. I have 1 minute with my district superintendent, and they keep saying, we don't want you to take our pastor away. I was intentional of trying to change the way they have been doing it. So we can see there is another way of doing this thing, and that's your responsibility. There are so many examples in your life you can find this is one of my obstacles. This is really, really something that is driving me crazy. It's not making me healthy, and I can address it. You can address it.
So I think one of the things we have to combat a lot when we talk about self-care is the notion that it's selfish. So one of the things in our own small group that we talked about when we were preparing this is that sometimes there can be a generational kind of gap in understanding about self-care. I don't know, I was trying to pull it up just then, but some of you may have seen several months ago there was like an open letter that I know I saw floating around on Facebook that was between, I believe, a clergy person who was the father and a daughter who was also a clergy person. And it was kind of like this dialogue between her dad and her, where he represented the viewpoint of saying, like, good Lord, this is not how we did it. Why are all these younger clergy talking about taking sabbaticals and time off and self-care and taking their day off? Because that's not what it meant for us to be in ministry. And her response was, and that is why we are such proponents for this. And this, I don't mean this to be as black and white about generational. This is just the example I had seen. But much to what Kalumba was saying about growing up in a family where he saw the relationship between SPRC and his father and his grandfather, this daughter was saying, I lived in the household where, yeah, Dad, you never took your day off. You never came to my ball games. You were never home for dinner. You didn't, the church always came before your family. And so, no, I want to do it differently. So I do think there is some awareness and just the way our culture shifts back and forth. It's like a pendulum. And again, there's it's important to recognize there is balance. But his response at the end of the letter was essentially to say, you're right. You are striving to do this from a more holistic point of view and vantage point because you've seen the damage that can come to individuals, to churches, to families, to communities when things are only one-sided. So I want to say self-care is not selfish. And I think self-care goes, it's just really broad. I would say, we're talking about SPRC. My gut is there are probably several people in this room for whom self-care also involves things like your salary and how well that SPRC supports you with continuing education, with how much you're paid, with your vacation time, with those kind of benefits. And that becomes very gendered oriented often, also becomes can become problematic when it comes to different minority groups. But those are a place that you can't practice good self-care if you're not being paid what you're worth. And I think oftentimes that is upon us to begin some of those conversations, but also to practice that self-care in our time as well. Self-care, we said, is not a bad word, and neither is no. So being able to say no to people is really important. To know that we can say no, but that we can also receive no from others is important for us to be able to practice. I think it gets really easy for us to constantly be yes people and to tell people, yes, I can help you with that. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do that. But we very quickly then find that those yeses we've said are saying no's to other things. And often we have done those so quickly that we have not stopped to give real consideration to what was the genuine priority there, what was most important in that for me to say yes to, for me to say no to. Sometimes it is important for us to say yes to someone and something outside of ourselves. Sometimes that is important that we say yes to ourselves. So I'd like you just to take a moment and with your neighbor, you can take a moment to think if you need to, but I want you just to quickly share when's the time that you said no to something that someone asked of you in your role. How many of you, when you said no, had any feelings of guilt? How many of you, it was very clear-cut, like you knew it was life-giving to say no? Okay. Y'all are like 50-50. I think it's important just to recognize sometimes our feelings absolutely can guide us. Other times, because we are in a helping profession, sometimes we feel guilty for not meeting a need, but it's not really our place to meet it. at that time. So just to, again, have that self-awareness that you can feel guilt, but that doesn't actually mean that that guilt is speaking truth to what you need to do in that situation. Saying no is saying yes to something. And if we slow down enough, if we take a deep breath, if we are centered enough in what that image of that abundant life that you talked about, 30 minutes ago was, then our no's and our yeses can become more clear. And those come from a place of holistic health and not just of immediate need or immediate kind of desperation or exhaustion. So constantly having before us that picture of that abundant life helps us to know as children of God and as spiritual leaders how we need to give yeses and nos in different situations. Yes. Yes, please. Mm.
And so this one in particular is a big struggle because where I am, if I were married, they'd be like, oh, okay, well, you got your kids, so you got your whatever. But if I'm single, it's like, well, you can go over here, yeah. And so no, it's not something that they understand.
Have you talked with them about that and maybe like shared?
Well, I'm planning to.
That's great.
Thanks to
Yeah.
Kalumba just before talking about how he managed through his staff.
Yep. That's great. A couple of years ago, when I was the associate, my senior pastor had children much older than mine, and oh gosh, he was an extreme E and life of the party and that kind of thing. And I have a loving congregation, so at Advent, it was like every Christmas party we both got invited, which is wonderful. It's hospitable. And he felt the need to go to all of them, and I was relatively new, so I was trying to go to all of them. And I don't know if anybody else has ever had this, but I had like one of the worst Christmas Eves ever. We had decided for my daughter, who was like in first grade, that for her, and she didn't, she knew that there wasn't a Santa Claus at that point. And so she knew she was getting her room made over. But we were still going to do the big reveal on Christmas Day, right? So it's Christmas Eve. We have worship coming that evening. I'm home for a few hours with my husband, and we're like painting like fiends and like trying to decorate this room. And I am about to lose my mind. And I just remember before Christmas Eve service, like me screaming at the kids, get out of the house and don't come back until I tell you can come in. It was terrible. And then, of course, I go lead worship. I'm just, so holy. Major wake-up call. Seriously. And so what I did, and I know our situations are a little different, but after that week after Christmas, I went back to my senior pastor and I was like, I get it. You want to go to all these, and that's great. I'm not going to have to. And he was okay with that. But so then when the invitations came, I had a decision to make. Would I give some, I'm sorry, I've already got a commitment, or would I just authentically tell them the truth? And so I decided to. And I was like, thank you so much for inviting me. I would love to come. However, I've recognized after last Advent season that I gave so much of my time that what I sacrificed was my family and my own sanity. And so I'm going to go to one Christmas party this year, and I will try to come to yours another year. And the response I got back was wonderful. I got really affirming responses from people. And so I know that's not true for all situations. I know every one of us will have those people who says, we don't care how busy you are. Come to my party, do my thing. But the majority of people, when we vulnerably share that we are fragile human beings too, we need life outside of church, whether we're single or married, whether we have kids or not, that it makes us a better person to have relationships with people outside of our role. When we can say that and in appropriate ways, I think most people meet us at that need. And then, like Kilumba saying, it begins to change the culture to where people begin to invite you into greater accountability with that. I routinely get people who will call me. I've always been pretty clear. I'm a super type A, and so on Tuesdays I write my sermons, and like the church knows that, and I don't do that in the office. I'm at home, and I've never told people do not call me on Tuesdays because I'm writing my sermon. But they have been very protective of that space, and they know Stephanie will come into the office after lunch or whenever she gets done. So when I get a call, I mean, even 2 weeks ago, I got a call and it was like, I know it's Tuesdays. I know you're writing your sermon, but I just needed to leave this voicemail, or call me when you're done. So somebody else, it might have been Michelle, was saying, people rise to the expectation. Most people really do. But I do think that takes some vulnerability on our part to let them see what our true needs are, what brings wholeness to our life. And then we've got to be at peace at some point with cutting those folks loose who just can't be healthy enough to allow us to be healthy, and work with those who can.
That's kind of a social media and self-care kind of thing, because in the olden days, like 10 years ago, if I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, I would, I had stuff to send to the pastor. I would put an email and I would send it to the pastor. And that was fine, because it would just lay there until whenever. But now when everybody's getting instant stuff, then that's another whole level for SPR and all of us, because I don't want to barge into her life. I know when it's appropriate, and I used to be able to time it.
Yeah, that it's complicated. I think honest conversations, I mean, that's just my go-to, is honest conversations help a lot. I'm trying to right now get better about Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that at least in that window of time, people can get used to, Stephanie doesn't respond unless it's really an emergency. If it's a question that I can wait and answer Monday through Thursday or Sunday, because we work on Sundays, but that instantaneous, and I loved the whole that don't post things on Facebook and expect that I'm going to be at the hospital, to see you. That kills me. Our church has not gotten to that place where we have a policy like that, but I feel it every time somebody posts something like that, and I know secretly they're being like, well, Stephanie better have read this, or why hasn't she called to check on me, because I put it on my timeline. So.
Something about, earlier you mentioned about, people will emulate, the pastor, like with dress code and things like that. But when you're transparent as well, you're also teaching as well. So when you're teaching, you're being transparent. You are then also laying with the congregation. Now, you too can be transparent. You too can be honest. You too can set boundaries.
Yep.
And it's okay to say no. And it's okay to take that, we're going to call it selfish time or self-care time. But so much education will happen from the leader being open and honest and taking responsibility.
Yep.
And not feeling guilty about it
Yeah.
at all. Because then the rest of the people will also, those who can't emulate it, that's part of whatever treatment or therapy they need to go through. And those that can emulate it, you're just helping them with their growth.
Mm-hmm.
So always just kind of embrace that and keep doing that. So very good.
Several years ago at this point, I was with a group of clergy that went to Montana, and we got to spend a few days with Eugene Peterson. And we went there. North Alabama had this grant program where you could develop your own study plan for 3 years and go. They would give you $100,000 for a group of 9 clergy to go study, and he was a part of our study plan. And so we went. It was like in the middle of our 3-year travel plan, and we all went thinking Eugene was going to give us the spiritual toolkit to rejuvenate our souls. This is how to be in ministry long term. So we're literally sitting on the ground around him, and we're like, what is it? Do we need to be getting up at 5 having coffee? Do we need to get up at 4:30, read the Bible? What is the spiritual disciplines we need to have? And I will never forget it. And he's looking at us, and we were tired and worn out, and he's looking at us, and he said, you need to throw out the word spiritual discipline. I think that's contextual. I think he was saying to us, y'all are looking for the how-to 1, 2, 3s and the do's, the shoulds, and quit, shoulding yourself. And he said, the only thing you need to practice is Sabbath. And you need to teach your people that you practice Sabbath. And then he just told some beautiful stories about what Sabbath looked like for him over the course of his ministry, for he and his wife and his family. But you were talking about kind of that teaching people, but everything he told us was you got to teach them. You don't just go in and arbitrarily make a new rule or this is the way I do it, but help them understand why that is a priority, how that benefits them. So part of his practice was each day he would get into the office, and the first 30 minutes there, his door was shut. But he wrote this column and told them from the pulpit, my door is shut because the first 30 minutes when I get to the office, I'm praying for you. And so that's how I want to begin my day. And then he wrote a whole thing about what in the world am I doing on my day off? And he wrote to them talking about hiking and how he and his wife go and they pack a lunch, but they don't talk on the whole hike. They are just quiet. And I mean, it's all particular to him, what brought him abundant life. But he taught people, and that's where I got the practice of telling people this is my sermon writing day. But he's been right. Every time I have said this is how and why I spend my time this way, for the most part, barring emergencies, people have respected that. So I think that us as spiritual leaders being vulnerable and authentic with people gets us off the pedestal, which often puts us in problematic situations to believe it about ourselves and to allow others to treat us as if we're different from them. And at least I personally, I don't buy that I'm different than any of my parishioners.
Awesome. That's very good. Do you know what it is? You got it right. Conflict. That's Chinese. That's Chinese. No matter what we do, my friend, we can come up with all these wonderful things in the life. We set them up. We can say no. We can do all these. And beautifully done. Guess what? We are working in an environment that has the ability to bring what? Conflict. If you like it or not, conflict will always be with us. Now, the beauty of that, when you look at these Chinese characters, it has two characters, right? One is danger, and the other one is opportunity. So in conflict, in Chinese, you have danger and also the opportunity. Meaning, not all conflicts are bad. You can find the opportunity of what? Of growth within the conflict. Now you have all these things that happen in your setting or in your life. And it depends on how you look at the conflict. The conflict can be, you can change it and turn it in opportunity for what? Looking at yourself and also helping other people. It has become a way of contributing to your growth. Don't just, the Chinese said, don't just look at what is bad, but look also at the opportunity. I will never forget my grandmother actually, when we went to a village and visited my grandmother. They don't have road, they have a little path. And then my grandmother taught us a lesson and said, when you are walking in the path and you trip yourself and you fall, what do? Where do you look? When you fall, my grandmother said, don't look where you went down. Look and find out what made you fall down in the first place. Maybe it's a root in the path. What do you do when you find it? It gives you the opportunity to take your machete, cut it, and toss it around. The next time you will not trip into it, especially when you're working at night. And also you have helped other people, especially when we have people carrying the load on the head and then they trip. That's a disaster. So danger, conflict brings to us the opportunity to look at ourselves. What can I improve? How can I make myself whole again? It's happening in the church. Sometimes don't run away, but find a way to address it in a way that will be constructive. Sometimes you will find a way on that. This is the need in my congregation. Now, how do I address it? How do I talk with my leadership that we have, this is the thing we have? How do we address it in a way that will help us see what's going on and we can grow together? At the same time, help myself in where I am. We're talking about abundant life. It's all about me being well-grounded and also be able to help other people. If you are not connected, remember the vine. If you are not connected and then you have a stress of working environment, you have a conflict in your congregation, and that a wind that is blowing, and what happened to you? You become a liability in the church. You can snap. And this is what happened, my friend. Remember, if that was the last time or 2 months ago, what happened in the pastor in Chicago, in a well-known congregation. Have you heard that? Yeah. What church is that? Willow Creek. A powerful and well-known pastor. What happened? And this can happen. What happened is we find ourselves connected. We think we are connected, but we are dead if we are not doing self-care. And that's a danger. When you find yourself in a stressful situation, then the opportunity of abuse also will go up. If you neglect your relationship with your wife, and then also the danger of what? Abuse will go up. No, these are examples, my friends. Don't just say to yourself, oh, not me. No. Watch out.
So just quickly, a few things that we have found that can be really helpful are having role models. Role models for physical, emotional, social, or spiritual life. Do you have a spiritual director? Do you have an accountability group? I have found, I worked with this pastor years ago, back when I started ministry, but I didn't have the good enough sense to build the relationship with him. He was newly retired, that I do now. Now he's like 88, but he's my spiritual director that I go see regularly. And it is a wealth of knowledge to go and sit with him and just kind of share everything that's going on. And then these very carefully crafted questions that often are centered on love, centered on not reacting, that he asks me, invites me to consider situations with. And I think if he was here, he would say is a real gift to him at 88 to have me coming and wanting to develop that relationship with him. So think of those people in your connection. They may be clergy, they may not, but people for whom there's something about their life, their spirit, that you would like to model. And my gut is you're certainly not going to offend anybody by naming that, but inviting them to build a relationship where maybe you meet once a month and just spend time together. Someone that you hope to emulate something from their life can be a gift to you and to them. Again, back to the question of what can you lose track of time doing because it brings you joy? What is that thing that puts a smile on your face that you lose track of time doing? For me, if it's not outside, and I just realized this summer that it's something apparently I do much more in the winter. So I like to cook, and I like to dance while I'm doing it. And it embarrasses my children like crazy. But it is, I don't know if y'all do Enneagram stuff. Okay, so I'm a huge fan of Richard Rohr in the Enneagram, and I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, which means that I feel things in my body. I also store trauma and stress in my body. So there's something about turning on ridiculous music that ticks my children off and dancing with the spatula in my hand that can undo almost any amount of stress, and I can absolutely lose track of time doing it. And even though they make fun of me for it, it also, that's something that they get into as well, even if it's just that they can roll their eyes because they're teenagers. So what is it you lose track of time doing? What is it can you do, even if it's not, so let's say that you're, oh my gosh, I love to be in a boat on the lake. Well, you can't do that just any day and every day. So what is it that you can do in your week that's more manageable? And then you save that for the time when you have, half a day or a day off during the month to go do. Think of those things for yourself. And to whom are you accountable? And where can you be completely honest about all facets of your life? I know in the work that we do that having that safe space is a real priority. Oftentimes, if you have someone who resonates with the type of work you do, that is really helpful. It may be a spouse. It may be a retired clergy person. It may be a counselor. I personally believe that we should all have a counselor. And I don't know how we can recommend for other people to go see them if we don't know what really goes on in those offices and have a practice for ourselves. So that just pay somebody to listen to you and to keep it confident. I mean, that's pretty simple. And I don't know about y'all, but at least North Alabama, our conference insurance is such that, that's a really ridiculously small copay. And I get 8 free sessions a year if I will do it. So use those resources. Like, don't give yourself the opportunity to become so worn out or worn down that you're susceptible to the risks we're talking about. Because I love that Kalumba said it, and my mama taught it to me. No one is above anything. We are all human, so we are all susceptible. We all have the same frailties, and so let's do the things that we know that help us to not put ourselves in at-risk behavior. We intended to have y'all a handout, and we don't. But if you Google self-care assessments, you'll find a plethora. So what you're looking for when you do that is something that helps you think through, are you doing some of these important things? Something for your physical health. Do you get exercise regularly? You don't have to be a marathon runner or a weightlifter, but do you get up and walk a couple of days a week minimally? Do you get a massage if you like that kind of thing? Do you take the time to care for you? Do you get enough sleep? Do you get enough sleep? Do you take all of your vacation days? Because we should. So are you doing that? I loved this one. Do you wear clothes that you like to wear? Like, that's a simple thing, but I don't know about you, but I'm recognizing we have a free night tonight, and I'm totally changing my clothes before I go to the Riverwalk and eat dinner, just because it makes me feel good. I love jeans, and you don't normally present in jeans when you don't know the audience. So I'll be slipping into my jeans because those make me feel more like Stephanie. Do you write in a journal? Do you pay attention to what you're grateful for, like a gratitude journal? Are you curious about life? Do you ask questions? I liked this one under emotional self-care. Do you allow yourself space to cry? I don't care whether you're a man or a woman, but do you allow yourself to feel a range of emotions? And I know sometimes we're in situations, particularly in the pulpit, when we don't need to be manipulative emotionally, but that doesn't mean that we don't have emotions. That means we need to make sure we are processing our own emotions in appropriate places. So, turn on your favorite crying movie or whatever it is you need to do to get that emotion out. Do you laugh? Do you put yourself in situations to regularly laugh, to have that kind of joy? Do you get out in nature? Are you open to not knowing? I thought that one was particularly good. Do you sing? Do you meditate? Do you spend time around youth and children? Appropriately, obviously. Are you quiet? Do you have time for quiet? Anyway, there'll be way more questions on the assessment, but just to help you think through, and those things, needs will be different for each one of us. But look for an assessment, because you're gonna choose to be blind to the things you're blind to. We can't know what we don't know. So an assessment tool will help us be intentional about all areas of our life, to ask ourselves those questions about, are we really addressing the totality of the needs we have as individuals?
Well, we love God, don't we? Yes, we do. We love others. That's why we as pastors, we are just giving and giving and giving and giving. Sometimes in this time, in this era, guess what? We are so available 24/7. Isn't that true? Oh yes, you are available 24/7 if you don't pay attention, because your cell phone, you got it everywhere. My wife and I traveled to Zimbabwe. She was doing a conference in Zimbabwe. We are in Zimbabwe. There is a need at the church, even though my wife said if something happened to the church, you have a pastor to call to. And guess what happened? We were sleeping and not knowing the difference in time. It's like 7 hours between US and Zimbabwe. The cell phone rang. Picked it up. That's the church member calling. We looked at each other and said, what? We are available everywhere we are, but we got to be intentional. But she has to take that call because it was so significant. Someone needed her. It was so important. You know how we are giving all the time? By giving all the time, it's like water in us. Keep on going. And what we need is to fill us again. How well do you do at loving yourself? How well? Again, I love my conference. We just came out of a retreat. Today's retreat. They gave us a retreat where also we have to learn how to be healthy, physically, spiritually, physically, and financially, provided by our conference. And the need is to see us what? Healthy. If you love yourself, especially as pastors, you have a retreat offered to you like this. Don't let it go. It is there for you, to help you in your wholeness. We were there, my wife and I, when we had another retreat. We went to the lake because we had the time just for us. On the lake, as they said in French, bras dessus, bras dessous. That meaning hand in hand, just enjoying time. That is provided. If you love yourself, don't say, oh my gosh, my calendar, my sermon, my thing. It will always be there. You need time just for yourself. Sometimes I am amazed. I look at my colleagues. Oh, I have an excuse because my previous calendar, but we know that it's available for you. Don't pass it out. So I'm just going to ask you to take a few moments and talk amongst yourselves about how well do you do at attending to your spiritual, emotional, and physical needs. Just take a few moments and talk and share. Well. It is so good to share your own experience, to learn from one another. And guess what? We are at the end of our moment together. Let me say this. Back in Texas, my wife and I were in Texas, one of our bishops happened to be Bishop Norris. Some of you know who Bishop Norris is. He told us something I always cherish. He said, if I were to do it all over again, I will always take my vacation. My vacation as a pastor. If I were to do it all over again, I will always take my vacation. So, my friend, in other words, I need to take care of me. And he told us, pastors, I want you to take your vacation because it's a time of renewal, not a working vacation. It's a time of renewal. The church will always be there. And take care of your family because your family is so important, as Stephanie said. When your children have a game, find in your time to attend to those games. They are in a band. When I learned from Bishop Norris, well, was a curse or not, but my two children in high school, they were in a band. You know those at the band, were in the band. They go out. That means I have to be there. That means I have to work in a concession stand. You know that, right? I don't want my children, or the parents are there, but where is dad and mom? And they feel like I'm being abandoned. So take care of your families. Especially, I said to myself, maybe I need to write a book. Why children's pastors are reacting the way they are reacting. Sometimes in the church they said, oh, pastors' children, they don't do that, but you don't know what they're going through. So it's your responsibility to be intentional about your children, that the only parent they have is you. Again, the church will always be there. You will be gone today. They have a funeral, and somebody will be sent to the church. Take care of yourself, my friend. As we come to the end, then there is someone who said after we finish, we conclude together.
Let's just read together our closing liturgy, which is the scripture that we began with. Keep me safe, my God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. I will praise the Lord, who counsels me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my tongue rejoices. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand.
The end.
Now, we do want you to know, just 1 second very quickly, Stephanie Arnold, Kalumba, Kilumba. No, I messed it up.
Kilumba, like a key.
Kalumba, Kilumba. Michelle Foster Beckerleg, Joy Melton, and Rob Vaughn. We are the part of the interagency task force that put this particular curriculum together. As we said, it's all on your flash drive. Please know that all of us or any one of us are available to answer any questions you have, to go into further discussion, or to help provide or point you to other resources. So please feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Before you go out, I have one. Oh, you already? Okay. Okay. All right. Then thank you so much.